Hello everyone and welcome to the Grumpy Surfer Podcast. I am the Grumpy Surfer and your host, Adz and Luke. On the podcast this week, I have a surf coach and a tech guy from one of the biggest online surfing programs in the world, OMBE, Ocean, Mind, Body and Equipment. In the podcast, me and my guest talk about everything from board design all the way up to surfing technique and some other random stuff as well. So please enjoy my conversation with an absolutely awesome guy, Luke Hardacre. Luke Hardacre, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, mate. How are you?
Really good. I've got 3 questions for you that I always start with. How are you? Where are you? And have you surfed today?
I'm good. I'm in St Agnes, Cornwall. I have not surfed today. I went down to the beach and it was semi-windy, pretty average, and about 30 to 40 guys in the tiny little bay of St Agnes. So I was like, yeah, no, I might wait till later in the day.
That seems to be the sort of like the prevalent thing at the moment. You know, I've been looking at the surf cams the last few days because of the swell we were talking about before we put this on record. And there's just so many people just sort of like in the water. I mean, it's a good thing, but, you know, it kind of puts you off a little bit. But it makes you go and explore those little recesses as well.
Yeah, I think it's good. In some beaches, St Agnes really can't handle much of a crowd. And some days it gets up to like 60 people and there's one peak. And I'm kind of just like, when I see like 40 people in the surf and another 10 in the car park, I'm like, yeah, I'll come back on another tide when everyone's at work. That dawn surf doesn't happen too often these days.
Yeah, I was on holiday down in Woolacombe, in North Devon, a couple of weeks back, and the Woolacombe, I forgot how small it is. You know, there's a few pubs there, there's a couple of surf shops. There's quite a few good little, you know, breaks going from Woolacombe all the way back to Putsborough. You know, there's lots of little peaks there, and then you've got Coomsgate and the rocky areas there that you can surf. But I was when the sun came out, there must have been about 5,000 people on the beach, like all the way from the edge of the town, or halfway along the beach, which is what 2 miles long.
Yeah,
it was mental. I was like, where did all these people come from?
I don't get it. I don't know if you saw the photos. For people who aren't in England, they probably won't have any concept of this, but Perranporth, which is like one beach over for me, had 14,000 in last year's, like that. Like everyone's allowed to travel now. COVID's kind of over. And I just thought, there's not even enough car parking for 4,000 people. How do you get 14,000 people on the beach? And I saw the photo and it was kind of like a Where's Wally game. And I just thought, wow, this is mental. Like there's no capacity for that.
Yeah, I'm definitely one of these people now that I definitely call myself a surf snob. I'm not one of these people that will go down when it's super windy. I'll wait for the good days, and when the good days are, I'll wait for a decent, you know, good groundswell to come through, and I'll go to those places. You know, I'll go and find the reef breaks. I mean, we're quite lucky in North Devon, as opposed to like you guys down in Cornwall at the moment. There is quite a significant amount of reef breaks around here.
Yeah.
Ones that people know of and ones that people don't. You know, and there's only a couple in Cornwall, isn't there?
Yeah, there's not really a lot of options. So like Aggie always gets busy because it's one of the few sheltered spots from wind. But it's weird, like when I went back to Oz earlier this year, if I saw some of the point breaks with like 200 people, I wouldn't blink an eye. I'd just paddle out and be like, cool, I've just got to outmaneuver them. But when I see some of the English beach breaks and it's 60 people in one peak, I'm kind of like, I'm just going to be like dodging people. Like this is, you know, it's kind of a weird attitude to have. Like when I'm in Oz, I just don't even think about it. It's just like, you just know there's going to be that many people.
How do you deal with that though? I mean, I get a little bit frustrated when I'm at Lynmouth and there's, you know, 20 to 30 people on like the Blacklands peak. And I'm like, you know, that's why I surf a mid-length, because I like to cheat, and I get into it a little bit earlier than everybody else. But, you know, when you've got 200 people in there and, you know, you've got set waves coming through, that's a lot of people trying to get the same wave.
Yeah, it depends on the day. If it's not big, I will just, like, it's kind of a game, and I hate that it is a game. And we're all players whether we choose to accept it or not, but it's a game of positioning. And at a point break, about half the crowd is non-competitive. Like they are just fish in the water sitting around splashing. They're too wide, they're too far out. They're 5 people on the outside. So I just kind of look at most of them and I'm like, okay, you're not even competing for waves. If I just position myself tighter to the point break and go closer into the peak of where it's breaking. So usually instead of paddling up the point, I'll paddle in to the side. And usually I'll be able to, if I'm paddling up the point, I'll be able to come in and get a wave underneath most people. On the bigger set waves, it's pretty crap when there's guys out there with longboards and you're on a short board or a mid-length, because they're going to come from 20 meters out. And then again, it's the same thing. I kind of just look at them like closest to the peak has priority. So I'm just like, how can I put myself in that position to be there? Because that's the main thing. Because once I'm at the peak and I'm the closest one there, everyone else is then dropping in on me. But again, then it comes into etiquette of like not snaking people and not paddling in. Like if I can paddle 10 meters to someone's side, I'm like, that's free game. Like they're sitting too wide.
When I'm on a beach break, and I'm talking like Croyd or even Fistral or some places like that, some well-known beach breaks, I'm not one of these guys that like to sit in the pack with people. When the beaches are separated into different peaks. I'm definitely one of those guys that goes, right, there's a peak there. I'll go and paddle over, but I'll sit in like a space and I like 10 meters to my left and 10 meters to my right and in front and behind me. And I don't like anybody around me.
Yeah.
And what I find this, and I don't know whether anyone else does, but you find yourself in that little bit of space in a crowded lineup, and then a wave comes through, you catch it, and then you kick out and you go to paddle out, and then people follow you. And I'm like, that fucking go away.
Yeah. I'm probably not guilty of like coming over to another peak, but if someone's sitting exactly where I want to sit, if they catch a wave, I paddled exactly to where they were. I'm like, you've had your turn. Like I'm now moving to where you were, and I'm like trying to give them the respect, but also them being like, cool, you've gone. Which I then also find super weird when if I've caught a wave and I paddle back out and I sit in the exact same spot I was before, and sometimes people give you these dirty looks being like, are you getting all the waves? And I'm like, I'm just sitting at the peak. Like you could have moved to where I was. You could have done so many different things and taken the spot and I would have respected you. But if you give me a 5 meter like radius around me and I can just sit in the same spot every time, I'm like, I don't feel like I'm doing anything wrong. It's just like, I'm just going to sit where it's breaking, and that's what you should do as well. So definitely guilty of, seeing a spot that I want to be. And if someone moves out of it, I will jump into it straight away.
I watched the new video that you guys put up onto YouTube about mid-lengths. I think it was a few days ago, and I was just laughing at little bits of it.
Yeah.
When Ant was saying that, he liked surfing his mid-length because it was easy to get into things.
Yeah.
But you talk about longboarders and mid-lengthers. They normally sits kind of like in the same sort of spot. I generally will move my 7.0 where I would normally sit on a short board anyway. The only difference is when you get those those fatter ones that come through, that it's harder to get into in a lower volume short board.
Yeah, for sure.
I can just jump on them, and like you say, the odd person looks around at you, you fucker.
Yeah. I think all summer I've only probably ridden my longboard, which is a 9.0 log, and I've just positioned the same as I would on a short board. And I think, there's quite a few dirty looks, and I don't know, what do? You just look at them and be like, well, it's just positioning, really. But I haven't got a mid-length. I'd love to get one. I've been kind of coy on how many boards I have at the moment, just space.
Yeah, I've got a selection, let's say, from 5.8s all the way up to a little 5.8 fish, all the way up to I've got a 9.8 SUP.
Nice.
Which is pretty cool. I use it on my little local down here in Exmouth because it's normally fat and small, but it gets you into something and gets you some longer rides. And I see guys out there on shorter boards and stuff, and then they just really struggle, really. But I was having this conversation with somebody the other day, actually. Like Exmouth is, if you look at it geographically, I can't get out my words out.
Yeah.
It is the perfect, like sandbar point break.
Mm.
But what's really annoying about it is you've got this really horrendous tidal estuary that pulls all the water out, that moves the sand around a lot, so it stops the swell entering into it. But also where Dartmouth is, there's like a
I know Dartmouth very well.
yeah, so it's got like that little corner. And I was just saying, like, if I could get a laser beam in my fingers and cut that bit of land off right there, and then just move it over, then stuff would swing in, it'd be epic.
Yeah, I did COVID lockdown, the first ones in Dartmouth, and there's like those little beaches right at the river mouth, and the whole time I'm just like, oh, if this wasn't just straight dead cliffs, there'd be a perfect little point break. There's all these little rocks. It'd be like a little novelty wave, but it'd be something. And just, yeah, the whole time I was just like, there's never going to be surf here.
Mate, we've been nearly talking 10 minutes, and
Jump
I haven't
into
really
it.
introduced you to who you are. So, mate, can you just introduce yourself and explain what your role is within the OMBE team?
So, my name is Luke Hardacre. Most of my work is not seen by everyone because I do most of the back end, behind the scenes stuff for OMBE. So, managing all the websites, the app, the community, all the kind of business sided stuff, along with Jeremy as well. And then I do the OMBE podcast, which is also kind of, I'll go on a slight tangent here, but it was a very odd, not something that I ever picked myself doing. Getting into podcasting, I kind of sent the message out to the guys being like, yo, I think like we should be doing a podcast. I think it's an alternative way that people will want to listen to the message I guess we're putting out. And no one was responding to it. And I was just like, because I'm in England, they're in Australia. And I was just like, cool, I can't be there in the room. Just be like, I think you guys should do this. Because if people want to drive to the beach, they want to listen to something short and quick about surfing. And I walked into the local surf shop here that is a coffee shop as well. And I was talking to him and he kind of turned and looked at me. He's like, man, you don't really talk much, do you? And I was like, nah, I don't really need to say, too much. And we had this little back and forth little chat. And then I said, you know what's the funniest thing? Like, I'm going to be starting to do a podcast. He just looked at me in his complete disbelief. He's like, what? So you're going to interview people? I'm like, nah, it's pretty much going to be me talking for like 20 to 30 minutes straight. And he's just like, I don't believe this. So yeah, kind of by like being pushed into a corner of like no one else wanting to do it and thinking that we needed to do it. Yeah, I started a podcast, which was an odd experience for an introvert.
Yeah, so that podcast is called In Depth, a Surfer Podcast, or Surfing Podcast even.
Yeah.
How'd you find doing that on your own? Because obviously, when I do them and I started it up, I'm kind of interviewing stroke just spinning shit with people, really. It's quite difficult. I've done a couple myself where I've just kind of sat there and just, went off the top of my head. I have found it quite difficult, if I'm honest.
Yeah, really much harder than what I thought it would be. And I guess for those who are unfamiliar, it's very much like 15 to 30 minutes of just straight surfing advice. I guess because there's already so many people like yourself who are giving out, I guess, conversations with people in the surfing world, and I was like, okay, I just give them the advice. It's not really being done. Let's just do that. I found it really difficult. And I started just by not giving any care to it. I was just like, I'm just gonna throw things out there. And the first episode was super rough, and then slowly I started like adding in audio and other things to try and make it better. And I still edit it super rough. I'm just like, it works. It just needs to get it out there. When you listen to some other podcasts, they've got so many, like some of the true crime podcasts, they've got like background noises for every little thing that's said, and I'm like, I'm like, nah, I don't need to be doing that kind of level of stuff. But I found it really hard because I also write a written guide to the whole podcast, which then goes on the website for people to read. So I got to a point where I felt if I recorded it first and then tried to write after, it just took so long. Whereas now, like I write it first and then I record the podcast from what I've written, and then that gives me kind of, I guess, dot points on how I want it to go, and then found a flow. But yeah, it's much difficult. I prefer the interviews because they're just easy.
Have you had any feedback from what you've been doing?
Yeah, I've had quite a lot of people when you came up to the wave pool and we missed each other.
Yeah.
Um, Quite a lot of people from the community are really enjoying the podcast. Every now and then, like this morning, I got one where someone was like, "Can you please explain this detail a little bit more?" So sometimes when something's clear in my head, and you don't have that visual aspect of like I'm explaining. So yesterday's podcast was about steep takeoffs. When I don't have that visual aspect to be like, this technique is for something when it's double overhead, you
Yeah.
sometimes miss that clarification where having video and audio is so much better. But yeah, the feedback's been good. It's been going strong. I think it's mid 30s of the episodes now, which yeah, surprised me a lot. I didn't think I'd be doing a podcast and then let alone getting close to 40 episodes.
I've got a bit of feedback for you as well.
Go for it.
So when I went to Portugal with the Navy surf team in March, which was like my last sort of like official trip in the military, my two really good friends, Andy and John, I showed them the OMBE content. They love it. My friend John uses it all the time. He raves about it all the time, tells everybody. It's kind of like I go into his office every now and again. I just get locked in story about what his skating has been doing and stuff. And like, mate, you know I watch it too, right? You know, you don't need to tell me about it. Anyway, I'm diverting here a little bit.
No, it's super interesting to me.
Yeah, so when we went to Portugal, the waves were like really big, you know, like on the Ericeira coast, it was kind of like 15 to 20 foot. So we were driving every day from Ericeira down to Lisbon, around the Carcavelos area.
I used to surf coach there.
Yeah, yeah.
I did a whole season at Carcavelos.
What's the point break called round the corner? Um,
Oh
I should,
God, that is way too far back in my brain to remember off the top of my head.
anyway, that's where we were surfing.
I know exactly where you're talking. There's kind of like right on the highway. It's off. There's a couple
Yeah,
rocks. Yeah,
yeah. Amazing place. Again,
yeah,
perfect mid-length area.
yeah. Really good spot.
But they listened to the podcast you did about um, the mindset of surfing big waves,
Hmm.
and it really helped them because even though you know we'd moved from the north coast down to the south, it was still you know pretty solid. There was some really good big solid swells coming through,
Hmm.
probably uh, big in what they would like normally be comfortable in. I'm not saying like I'm a big wave charger or anything
No,
like
but
that, but
big is just perspective, really. Like for what's big for my partner, who is somewhere in that beginner low intermediate range. Like big for her is shoulder high, head high. Whereas, big for me is like when it gets overhead and it's like, 1 to 2 times overhead, it's like I'm like, yeah, okay, it's getting really big.
yeah, I mean that the advice that you gave out there about you know just kind of like focusing and mentally visualizing yourself doing the things that you're doing on
Mm,
those waves and paddling into them, it really helped them. So yeah,
yeah, it's awesome to hear.
have a chuck up,
Um,
mate. Have a chuck up.
well, actually, what was really, I guess, interesting for me is that when I went back to Oz, I went and surfed with Clay and when we were there, it was through all the storms and the flooding, and there was just constant swell the whole time. And being with Clay is sometimes really hard to say no. And he's just like looks at the games like, cool, grab a board, we're going. And I'm like, I don't even know what the surf's doing, like what's happening. Like it's just a whirlwind, and we're in the car, and we show up to the artificial reef, which he just loves. So like in somewhere in the Gold Coast, they've just dropped a whole bunch of basically like stones and built this reef, and it's like 200 to 300 meter paddle out the back. And I thought I was paddle fit when I went to Australia, and then I went back to the point breaks and here, and I was just like, I'm not paddle fit to do that far of a paddle. But it was double overhead, and I was out of my comfort zone and sitting there on this reef break that I'm super unfamiliar with. That whole episode about managing fear came really heavy back into my head, and then I also realized something else that I was doing to myself, which was that the fear of the event, so the fear of like going over the falls or being thrown onto the reef, was worse than the actual event. So sitting there and anticipating it and being like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? I don't want this to happen, was getting me into this state of like anxiety and stress. I literally paddled in and made it happen. I was just like, I've really just got to get this out of my head, and just threw myself off the ledge and just sat there, and everything I went through in that episode, which was just, yeah, just to let go and kind of treat it like a roller coaster. And it was just one of those things that I needed to get my head out of the, like, I'm on a reef break that I've never surfed. I don't know how it works, and it's double overhead. Like, clearly not the time I want to be trying to figure it out in a crowd. Yeah, and it was kind of really mind blowing for me how horrible it was making me surf thinking about it. And then when it actually happened, I was like, so chill. Like, what am I worried about?
Yeah, I think I must be some sort of psychopath, I think. Because
Yeah.
I never really like think about stuff like that. I see it and I just go out and I tell the story like I've only ever really nearly drowned once,
Mm,
um, well twice, but I got caught inside when I was at airports in Bali and Kuta,
mm,
and I just got stuck on the reef and it was just big and gnarly. And I just kept getting smashed by white water. But
yeah.
that's a boring story. So the other one was I went down and to a reef and it was about 7:30 in the morning in the winter and I underestimated how big it was. Paddled down on my own. And this specific break is if you got caught inside, you get pushed onto the rocks into the fingers,
Oof.
and you don't want to be doing that basically. But
Mm,
there was a really big rip current dragging you back inside. So the paddle to stay on the peak and on the on the corner of it was you're constantly paddling all the time. So you might watch the QS guys when they're at I don't know, Bells or somewhere like that, when there's a massive swell running and it's really difficult to stay in one spot. It was pretty much what happened. And
yeah.
I went to paddle for one. Set came through and I missed it. And instead of being the bonehead that I always tell everybody else to do, if you paddle and miss, make sure you paddle back out again because you're not in the right spot. And I just went on the next wave that came through, and I was too deep,
Mm,
fell off, and then when I came up, I was like in the middle of one of these fingers, and I could like stand up in the fingers. But the
oof.
issue is every time the white water came through, the white water was like at least a head, double overhead coming in. So every time I tried to stand up, it just washed my feet away from under me. It mustn't have been that very long, but it felt like it was going on for quite a long time. But it got to the point where I'm running out of breath.
Mm,
I can't breathe if I don't get up on the side here. No one's coming to help me because I'm on my own. There's no one else in the water. I was on my own at 7:30 in the morning. It just turned light. And luckily, I managed to scramble up onto one of the fingers and the cockles. I had a brand new wetsuit on. That was all ripped. My board had a massive hole in the bottom of it. And I was like, that, fuck it, what am I doing?
yeah. Oh man. If there's some notes in there that just that, what am I doing? Being an ignorant person coming to England, I had never surfed in anything colder than like 16 degrees water. We went to Wales in Feb 2020, right before COVID kicked off. And I was like, yeah, let's do a dawn surf. There was no sun on the beach. There was frost all over the beach. I had no gloves, no hood. Um, I had my fingers in my mouth trying to keep them warm. I was just like, what am I doing out here? Like, this is not okay. And then I was sick for about 3 days. I didn't realize how cold it was. Just like pure, like I had boots, but no gloves and a hood. And I was just, yeah, bit of recklessness.
Mate, I don't wear anything less than a 4.3 even in the summer now. Like
Mm,
my body, I mean, I'm 40 now. I'm not going to blame age or anything like that, but I reckon the cold weather environments I went to when I was in the Marines has definitely taken its toll on my extremities. That's for sure.
yeah. I've made the plunge. The 3-2's gone. I've got a 4-3 and a 5-4, and that's it.
Mate, I've got three 5.43s and a 6.4, and that's
Bloody hell.
literally like all I've got all the time. I'm just wearing those. I even wore my 5.43 when it got warmer, like in the summer. I'm like that.
Ugh.
Nah, not getting cold anymore.
I think there's something about neoprene I just inherently hate, so I try and get as minimal as possible.
Yeah, well, you've got the luxury of coming from Australia where the weather's
Yeah.
super warm all the time, and you come here, like, you go, even if you go to, somewhere like France, and the weather's only a few degrees warmer. Like, oh, got my board shorts and my rashi. It's redders.
Yeah, I did board shorts one day this year, like the hottest day of the year. I was like, stuff it. If there's gonna be any day I do it, it's this year. It was all right. About an hour, and then I was like, all right, I'm cold.
Mate, let's talk a little bit about your background. So you're obviously an Aussie, which is, it's no fault of your own. But, how did you end up in the UK? And also, how did you end up hooking up with the OMBE guys and going through that sort of evolution?
I'll start with OMBE because that goes well back. So in 2014, Jeremy, who's from OMBE, and I were running a surf club together at uni. So we used to, it's kind of mad because we were just a bunch of, we're just kind of a bunch of dickhead surfers. And the university was throwing funding at us to like run events and organize group things. And, I'm kind of like, you look back at it in hindsight and I'm like, it's the last people you should be giving funding to. It's the last people you should be giving money to be like, go do things with it and like make your group bigger. So Jeremy was there for 2014 and then he finished uni. So him and I met then, and then I ran the club just by myself 2015 and 2016, and it kind of just exploded. We had lots of international students coming. Like we'd do these like weekend trips of 50 people going down to Byron Bay, and there'd be this huge weekend. We'd do a full weekend there, surf coaching and partying. But from that, we ended up getting, like, the group grew a lot, and then we ended up getting quite a lot more money to like do other events. And I was just like, I don't want to be stuck and learn to surf. And I had a couple of mates, and this guy said to me like one day, he's like, oh, we've got an event at the local, like the only surf shop in like Brisbane at the time. So Brisbane's not on the beach. It's an hour from the Gold Coast where our university was. He's like, come along. And halfway through that night, out steps Clayton. No idea who he was or anything, but he gave this presentation, and it was the first way that, like, I guess this would have been 2015. Like, no one had ever explained surfing in anything that was really tangible. Like, everyone was just like, go surf more. Like, if you want to get better, just go surf more. And here he was kind of explaining surfing in this way of like breaking it down to things that can be understandable, in that if you want to go learn golf, you go to the golf range or you go to a golf course and there's a pro there who'll teach you, but you don't really have that in surfing. And I've been a surf coach, I've worked at surf schools, and I have a really kind of low view of them because a lot of the time there are some really good ones, but a lot of them will just like, you're here to get your photo, you're on holidays, you're only doing this once, we're just going to push you into waves, and no one really cares about those people becoming better. So I pulled him aside and I was just like, so what the hell do you do? Like, what is this thing? And he's like, I'm a surf coach. And I'm like, okay, so like I have this university group, we've got some funding, like what can you do? And he's like, he just pulled out his iPad and he said to me, show me your pop-up. And I had no idea what he was talking about. Like, what do you mean, like pop-up on land? And he's like, yeah, like show me your pop-up. And I was like, I, being a young, dumb, early 20s kid, was just like, okay, whatever. Didn't take it seriously. He filmed my pop-up and just ripped it to shreds. And from that point on, I was like, okay, like there's just complete tough love. Here it is. Take it or leave it. I felt like I couldn't give him any excuses that we, young 20s males tend to have a lot of ego. It was a very just destroy my ego moment. So from that, I was like, okay, cool. Like, give me your numbers. We'll organize an event. And I ended up doing some training with him. And then I invited the rest of the group from the surf club. So we had like this big weekend trip where Jeremy came down and a bunch of other friends. So we started having this routine coaching from Clay for a little while. And then I left uni, fast forward a couple of years, finished up, went working. Jeremy and Clay had started, I guess what OMBE is now, probably 2016, 2017. They started like very slowly getting the ball rolling. So it's not like this COVID thing. It's been around for quite a while. It's just been like figuring out how they want to approach it. And then I went traveling for a year. I used to be an engineer working in the coal mines and in the office, and I had enough and I went traveling for a year. I came to England, so I'm dual citizen. I've got an English mother. but I consider myself 100% Australian. Sorry, no English heritage allowed. But then I came to England, and I had a brother here who was working here. I stayed with him for a bit, and when I came here, all my friends who'd come to England just like left. Like the minute I arrived on my traveling journey. So I was like, okay, what the hell do I need to do? I ended up meeting a girl. I then went traveling to, so I'd just come from Portugal, working a season as a surf coach. I then had booked a season in Morocco. And then through that, we kept talking. And then fast forward to like 2019, I then decided to move over to England because I was like, I'm done traveling. I got like offers to go to Sri Lanka to surf coach in Norway, and I was like, Sri Lanka wanted 3 sessions a day, and I was like, hell no, I'm not doing 3 surf lessons a day for next to no money. And Norway wanted half the minimum wage, and I was like, nah, like none of these offers are worth it to keep traveling. I've done a year, time to hang up and get back to work. So yeah, I took the opportunity and moved to England. And I said, I've got 1 year, 1 winter in me. Don't like the cold. It's now 2022. It's now 3 winters coming up to my 4th. So yeah, indefinitely here. But then yeah, OMBE, I think I'd known about all the stuff going on with OMBE and its previous versions, or I guess where we were at. And Jeremy and Clay have been close friends for such a long time that they were communicating with me about it. And they were kind of telling me what was going on. And it got to a point where like, oh, hey, we've done all these programs and these courses. Like, what do you think? Can you have a run through? And I ran through and I just started giving them feedback. And then like, it kind of just developed from there that they're like, can you do more? Do you have more capacity to help us? And then it kind of just turned out where eventually like, look, can you just give us like, as much time as possible? So that's been, the last 2 years or so.
Yeah, I mean, I've only been really sort of engaged in OMBE really since sort of like August. I was watching a load of the online videos and stuff, and that's kind of like how I got in touch with Clay and Ant. Really, is I like I do for a lot of these podcasts is I just message people and say, do you want to spin some shit, and I'll ask you some questions, and you can ignore me and speak about something else if you want. It's up to you. And then I found out that Ant was from Exmouth originally, which is literally like a mile down the road from me, which was mega coincidental. He's a bonkers bloke as well.
You didn't go out and witness his magic tricks in the bar?
No, not at all. I like any good person that has got a podcast to do research on people, and I saw like all the stuff they was doing, and he didn't want to talk about any of the stuff that he'd been on.
He's
the TV shows.
He's a very interesting character with a lot of layers. I've got a lot of time for him. Yeah, he's a good guy.
And I just started looking at it, and I was like, do you know what, this has got some clout to it. And then I got a little bit of access to your programs and started doing it myself, and it started helping. And I was just like, that. Do you know what, this is pretty cool. You look at the world as it is now, especially during and after the lockdowns for COVID, is that a lot of the surfing programs went online. And there's quite a vast number of them, but I think, again, giving you a bit of a chuck up, the content that you had and have now is by far the most user-friendly, and the community that's involved with it, which we'll talk about in a bit as well, is very unique. You haven't normally got a program where you've got access to a pro that you can just send a message to and he'll get back to you.
Yeah, it's mental.
Yeah, it's crazy.
The access that Clay's on, like, I'm dead on social media. I pretty much have it turned off everything bar work. I've just kind of gotten to a point with it where I just don't want to have Facebook, Instagram, this and that. Like, I'd prefer to like call someone than spend my time mindlessly scrolling. But yeah, being in the community, it is mental how often Clay is in there and just giving out advice and seeing what's going on and watching people's videos. He's an amazing person who has a lot of spare time for like everyone.
I mean, to be fair to you guys, you've got a lot of content that you need to keep on top of. I mean, I went on before we jumped on this, and I think I worked out that there was 19 different programs that you have, and then you've got about 7 or 8 different like levels of ability that people have. All the way from the beginner up to like your surf coaches and your shapers and stuff like that have all got their own individual little like forums that they can jump on and talk to. And you guys seem to be doing a really, really good job with staying on top of that and being present as well, because it's quite easy, I think, to set something up like this that is, I think globally it's kind of grown quite a lot, especially since in the last year or so.
I will say something different to that, because I'm actually quite humbly surprised by the OMBE community, like the people who are there, whether they're doing the training or not, who are just involved and understand what we do and show up and talk. Quite often I'll see something and someone will comment or write a post or post a video and say, hey, what's going on here? And by the time I see it, I've already seen 5 answers and I'm like, cool, that ticks the box there, that ticks the box there. I'm like, I don't really have much else to add. I'm like, it's mental that it's gotten to that point where people are going through the training and then they're training other people, that are a level below them or where they used to be. It's mind blowing quite often.
When I was having a little look on there as well, again, I found that the most people on there have identified themselves as being an intermediate surfer. Do you find most of the questions about surfing come from that sort of like genre of people, or do you find like the spectrum of it is, that there is really sort of a platform?
I find after having like spent several seasons working as a surf coach, people's egos and views of their surfing is so skewed. What one person considers themselves as like an intermediate or an advanced surfer, someone else doesn't. It's really difficult, and I'm not trying to be negative on anyone, but a lot of people aren't very honest with where they're at in their surfing, and they will like overestimate where they are. But at the same time, like, it really kind of doesn't matter as long as you're like working, like as long as you know where you are. I don't really care what you label yourself at. But a lot of people tend to fall in that intermediate like range, and unfortunately, like, you kind of got to label it like a low intermediate and a high intermediate. There's such a broad spectrum between the two that someone who's trying to turn would be a low intermediate, and someone who's perfecting their turns would be a high intermediate. And like, that's such a wide skill level between the two that it becomes really difficult. So to get it back to your question, I think the majority of people in the world are like intermediates. And if I think of my friends, how many of them are advanced surfers, and growing up in in Queensland, Australia, I know quite a lot of surfers, and to be honest, not many of them I would call advanced. Like maybe two guys I know from a surf club were advanced, which is quite scary. But then I think if I put it into like football or golf or whatever else, like, how many of those guys actually get to like a pretty high level?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a question here. Again, it's from John.
Go for it.
And he basically has asked, how best to advance, or how would you best tell somebody how to advance from being an intermediate surfer? I mean, look, if I'm honest, that's a very broad question.
It is, but there's a really good answer to it.
Let's hear it. Come on, I want to hear it.
One that I've actually already answered. So I think there's a podcast on this one, and there's a couple things on this. The biggest thing for most people, I guess, is to arm yourself with knowledge. In that, when I first started on this journey, like 10 years ago, when I first met Clay, it was like I was very kind of brought back down to earth on how much I didn't know. So if I was to go back and tell myself like what I wish when I was younger, it would be like to actually understand the movement of like how to do a cutback, how to actually like, how does that work? Because if I can understand how it works and how it then translates to my surfboard, I'm like, cool, I now just need to figure that out in practice. which then like, this leads to like going and trying to mimic it on land, because then you take all the risk away from it, which is like, if I can do it in a skate park on a surf skate, I can feel what that movement is meant to be like. And I'll put my hand up and say that I'm a much better surf skater than I am a surfer, because it's so easy to put the reps in and feel it and just do it again and again and again. That I wish my surfing and surf skating were kind of very much aligned, but they're not, because it's so much easier. You get more muscle memory in that. So by doing that, the then thing that a lot of the intermediates struggle with is that if you've personally made this choice of like, I want to be better at something, and this is regardless of surfing, it's just kind of life, that we put pressure on ourselves. When we start having expectations, we start having an ego, we start doing this, and this, and it just gets harder. So it's kind of, when you get into the surf, you're never going to surf well if you're tense, stressed, angry about something, frustrated, the waves aren't doing this or that. You're not going to surf well. You're not going to surf your best. And a lot of intermediates go hot and cold quite often. They'll have a one surf where it's like, yeah, I'm amazing. And then the next surf's like, why can't I even like get to my feet? Why can't I do a bottom turn? We've all kind of felt these kind of things where it's really frustrating. It's just letting go when you're in the water, that if you relax and if you want to focus on something, if you're relaxed and you can focus on something, then do it. But if you can't, like if you're trying to get better and you can't just relax, don't do anything. Just go out and have fun and hope that your training will show in that. And if you try and just be relaxed, and hopefully these things that you're learning eventually take over. When you can start actively working on your surfing in the surf, do one thing, only one thing. Because then it's like, if I change my board, change the beach I'm surfing at, change my takeoff position, change where I'm looking on my takeoff, change how I move, where I'm looking, it's like, how do you know what's working? You have no clue what is the one thing that's changing your surfing. Whereas if it's like, don't change your board, quite often is pretty much what I tell to most people. Like if you're struggling, it's more likely something else. There are dud boards, but most boards are pretty forgiving for most people these days. It's kind of like, change one thing that you can go, okay, so I did this differently. I changed where I was looking on my bottom turn, and that makes me go more vertical. It's like instantly you go, okay, by doing that, I know this is improving my surfing and giving me this. So it's kind of like, if you can just do one thing and measure it and feel it and change it, great. But you can't do 5 things and know what's like actually working. It's, yeah, really frustrating. And then the final thing for someone who is trying to get into like whatever it is, if you're beginner, intermediate, advanced, whatever labels we want to throw on it, if you're not in the surf, film everything you do. In that, if you're practicing stuff on land, trying to figure out the movement, surf skating, literally, again, there's a podcast on this one, it is just film everything you do. Because if you can, within 15 minutes, you can have a run in a skate park, do 2 laps or 3 laps, film it, come back, review it, find one thing to fix that, go again, come back, repeat the cycle, and in 15 minutes, you've changed your skating. Which is kind of like, when I work with someone one-on-one, that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm like, do this for 30 seconds, go again. All right, change this. And I'm like, you can give yourself that. You've just got to like have the eye for it and to spend the time filming and reviewing. And then the final thing would be, if you do get your surfing filmed, which is incredibly hard, but there is a lot of people in the OMBE community who are willing to sit on the beach and film each other, which is, yeah, like mental to think that that's now a thing. Like, I think it's amazing, but it's like, yeah, like hearing people actively saying, I'm not going to surf, I'm going to film you because we all want to get better. Yeah, it just sounds, yeah, not like too good to be true. But if that camera's on you and you can't surf comfortably, don't. Because if that's adding stress or tension, you're not going to surf well, you're just going to get frustrated. Anything to remove that frustration will be key. But if you can get filming, get it as much as possible. Because quite often you'll look at it, and there's one that sticks out, which a lot of intermediate surfers are afraid of, is like, this guy was at the wave pool in Bristol, and he was working on his cutbacks, and we were like, okay, why didn't you wrap your cutback all the way around and like hit the foam? And he was like, oh, I don't want to like get stuck behind the whitewash. And I'm like, okay, but where are you on the wave? So it's hard for people to visualize this, but he was 10 meters in front of the pocket. And it's like, so what are you afraid of falling behind the wave when you're 10 meters ahead? Like, you can fit your whole cutback in that space of the wave. You should do it. You should go for it, because all you're doing is surfing on the shoulder. And it's information like that, especially at the wave pools, that people can get that feedback so quick and be like, why the hell am I surfing out here? Why am I not in the pocket? Why am I not doing this? So yeah, very long-winded answer, but there is, yeah, really easy stuff that people can do. It's getting the knowledge is the hard part, understanding what's wrong and what to do right.
I always feel that I try and practice a lot. I've got a surf skate. I've had one for about, maybe 3 or 4 years now. And, I've been practicing doing the OMBE surf skate drills. But what I've also found is trying to translate what I've learned into the water, because, now I'm, from a personal point of view, set up my own businesses, working for myself after just leaving the military. And I don't know whether other people can find themselves in this kind of situation, is that I'm not by the water where I want to be all the time. So like I said at the very start of this, I'm a surf snob now, which means that, I go on the selected days that I think are going to be good. My whole point in this is that when I go and I get in the water and it's good, is that I feel like sometimes that if I'm trying to practice to do something, then I'm wasting my waves.
Okay, why are you afraid of wasting a wave?
Because I've only got a limited amount of time to be there. If I can ride a wave, I'm going to use Lynmouth as, prime example for this. I've had loads of really good rides over the years, like super, super long. If I had someone video, which I have previously, and had taken photos, I probably sick in my mouth a little bit when I look at the photos. But I like having that really long ride, but to work on my turns, to stay in the pocket, work on my cutbacks, work on my snaps, work on my bottom turns, where my coffee cup hand is, where my front arm is, where I'm looking on the wave. In my head, subconsciously, and I think I had this conversation with Clay actually, is that if I fuck that up, I've wasted something. I've then got to go and wait back in the pack again, and then I've then got to go back to it. But I think that's just a me thing more than anything.
To be honest, that's not exclusive to you. That is for those who are listening, we do, and I'm not trying to, I guess, shamelessly plug, but we have these monthly sessions where we talk to people about their surfing. And I don't know if you've actually been on one. You may have watched some of the replays because you've got access to the training.
Oh, I can't believe you're shaming me on my own podcast. That's shocking.
No, but I guess, sorry, man.
That's all right.
I actually haven't been to the last two, so you might have been. I just, I've been busy. But what a lot of people are afraid of is wasting a wave. And a lot of this leads to people surfing the shoulder because they don't want to get caught behind the wave. They are in fear running from the pocket because they don't want to get caught, they don't want to get dumped, whatever it is. It's super common, but I guess what that all leads to is your expectations, which most surfers have really shitty expectations in that they expect themselves to rip. They expect themselves like, hey, I've learned this thing on land, now I'm going to go out and do it and I'm going to get it first time. Or not, again, to call you out, but when you list 10 things, I'm already internally going well, that's too many things. And you could work on something as you're paddling and positioning, something that doesn't happen when you're surfing the wave, and that's one thing. And then you can work on something that happens during the actual surfing of a wave. When you start working on three things, it's too complicated. But also I'd almost challenge you for this, that a lot of people want to surf better, but they're kind of afraid. And this isn't a reflection on you, this is just a generalization, that when people want to surf better, they kind of want to go from zero to hero straight away. My cutback's really crap, and I want to get it so that I can do it perfectly. But then they're afraid to fall on that wave in a fear of wasting the wave. And I'm kind of like, what would be really exciting is if I got video, like for me personally, I would prefer to see myself do a really big turn and fail on it than make a really crappy average one where I kind of just like look at it and I cringe and I'm just like, oh, that's so slow. Like I'm barely on rail. I'm not doing this. So it's kind of almost like go out there with the intent and the expectation that you're not going to make anything, and that you go to do a turn and it's like, I just want to feel how a good turn can be. And a win is not actually riding out of it. A win is just feeling something different, so that when you do that and you feel that, you're like, wow, like this is amazing. I've felt this is different. And a trick for this, or a really easy example that anyone can do now, there is a whole training program on this, but changing the line you take on a wave is incredibly easy physically, but it's very difficult mentally. Have you done this yourself?
Yeah, I have.
Go. What was the, so I guess maybe I'll give some background then. So what I'm talking about is on your bottom turn, to get more vertical, it is a matter of changing where you look. And that if you know how to do a bottom turn, your body will figure out the math and learn to hold the bottom turn longer. And that by looking is changing where you're projecting yourself. The first time Clay got me to do this, to surf more vertically, I had this moment, and I can still remember it very vividly, of just being like, what the fuck? What the hell was that? And I got so much acceleration, and he was filming me, and he pulled me into the beach, made me paddle in, and it's just like, what the hell happened? It's like, I got so much acceleration and speed, I didn't know what to do with it. I was completely shocked. I just like froze, because I was just like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I've never surfed like that before. And he was just like, go back, do it again, and fit your turn in now. And it was just like this physical quick change of, instead of looking out across the shoulder, look pretty much directly to my side and be like, oh, I want to go there. And the mental aspect of that, and the fear and the like trying to then adjust to that, takes longer than the actual physical change. How did it go for you?
So mine was something very similar to that. I've been very much a kind of like what you would call a shoulder hopper. So the example you came with, the guy going really wide and then coming back round, so losing all of his speed coming out to the shoulder, and then wondering why when you're turning back you lose speed as you're coming back to the white water, and then you're having to pump again to get that speed back and to continue down. So, using what Clay was talking about, like changing the direction and getting right down onto your rail and looking up. Now, I found this was one of the things that was actually quite daunting, is looking up to the top of the wave in the pocket where it's going to break is quite a daunting position for somebody to go to, because it is literally like being on a skateboard, having a little ramp that goes up onto a wall and looking up a vertical face that you're like, oh my fucking God, this thing is just about to break on me. But that is the bit that is going to launch you. That is what coming up to the top of that and then coming back down again, like you're saying, is going to give you that acceleration. And once I conquered that fear of actually going up to hit that section, or coming up onto that section to get the acceleration to come back down, and I did it 2, 3, 4 times, and I was comfortable with that, then I could then consciously or subconsciously start working, okay, so I'm getting this speed like you were talking about. How do I slow down? Well, I then need to put another turn in and just stay in that little area there that's going to boom, boom, knock you down every single time. And that was a key point for me, I think. And once I started getting that, I was like, yeah, this is brilliant. And I just, I managed to stay there all the time then.
Did you have more fun doing that?
Yeah.
Did you fail a lot?
Yeah, I got hit in the head quite a lot with the board, because it's kind of like the analogy I'd use is when somebody goes abseiling. They're stood on the edge of that cliff with an abseil, and like as they go down, they're starting to, instead of just letting the rope go right out, so they zip down straight down, they start edging backwards and they're like feeding it in a little bit. And if you do that and you don't commit to it, then your body goes all floppy. And I found that board just went and like smashed me quite a lot. But then when I gained that confidence, I was like, right, this next one, I'm going to hit that bottom turn. I'm going to come up. I'm going to keep my stance. I'm going to be nice and loose, but keep my legs powerful, and then come off the top and turn all the way around. I was like, why the fuck haven't I been doing this? And it's almost been that frustration.
It is. But I've got a question for you as well. Did you feel like you had wasted any of the waves learning through that process and failing?
No, not
So,
really.
so what's your answer to your question then of like being afraid to waste a wave?
Don't be such a fucking pussy and just get on with it.
Because you asked me like I'm afraid to waste a wave, but then you've worked on one thing and it's changed your surfing massively, and you're like, no, I didn't waste a wave, and that's like, I wish everyone would have that experience that you've had, and I would hope that when you work on something again, just simplify it, but also then like remind yourself of that experience, that like that learning process and coming through it, you're not actually wasting it. When you feel it, it is like a holy shit moment. Like every time it is always like, what the hell was that? The first time is always like that. And yeah, having so much more fun. It's worth it. But it is also, I will say, for people who are listening, it does depend on the person. Like some people have different attitudes to learning. Some people want to just go, learn everything. Some people are like, F this, I'm just gonna do my thing.
Yeah, I think over time it was more of like a gradual thing. It's kind of like I don't know, like a kid going down the slide. A big slide at the park is like, oh my God, this is massive. I'm never going to be able to go on that. And they take a couple of steps up the steps, and then the next time they go up and they go all the way to the top of the steps, and then they come back down, and then they sit on the edge of the slide and they go, oh no, I ain't going down that. And then they come, do you know what I mean? So each time they progress a little bit more. And I think that's where I kind of developed that, instead of like fully committing each time and just absolutely, losing my mind because I wasn't making the waves that I was. I think I just gradually over time kind of like tipped into it. Which, am I wasting waves? Maybe. But I think it just worked for me. It's different people's interpretations of how they do things is different though, isn't it?
It is. And one thing I guess I was really happy to hear you say, and the explanation that you gave works very much for yourself, which was you said you wanted to keep loose in your upper body but powerful in your lower body, which that makes sense to you. That's your terminology and how that relates. And for other people, they'll be like, what the hell does that mean? For me to simplify that in a generalization, it was like, I feel too many intermediate surfers try too hard. And they're doing a million and one things, and their arms are going in one way and their legs are going the other way. And to hear someone like, I'm just going to simplify it and do less, and I'm going to feel more, I'm like, that's exactly what you need to.
Let's talk a little bit about the actual content that you've got in the OMBE program at the moment. So, like I said, you've got 19 different programs, and the main one being the actual OMBE method itself. Where did the development come for these different programs? Because you've got the bow shoe surfer, cardboard surfer, surf skating, psychology of surfing. There's lots and lots of different things that people can tap into now.
So I'm going to give a very bad explanation because a lot of it comes from Clay. But I've been there through, and Jeremy will be able to give a better explanation of some of this as well. But I've been through some stuff before, some stuff during, and I'm heavily involved in other stuff. But the original stuff was like the Bosu surfer, cardboard surfer, surf skate, surf psychology, the first 8 programs. Knowing Clay before this program came out, he was doing the Bosu ball training. That was some of the first training I ever did with him, and surf skating. And it was that training of like how your movements affect the board and how the board will respond to your different movements, and learning the muscle memory and stability and control, and learning the surf skating. And cardboard surfer was something that happened when I was traveling. So when I came back into the mix, it was really interesting because that was more people learning to control and coordinate their bodies without being super heavy on the back foot or anything like that, how to create speed. And a lot of people kind of turn their eyes and be like, well, a piece of cardboard's what's that going to teach me about surfing? And it's like, well, it's going to teach you how to use your stance and use your body. And, if you can't slide a piece of cardboard, you don't really know how to use your body. So all of that stuff those first initial 8 programs, and they've got that surf psychology one, which is like I think probably one of the best programs we've done in the past, just because it was no one else is kind of talking about the mental aspect of things. So there's a lot of tools in that. But that was all done without me, so I had no input in that. And then that was when the guys started talking to me about getting feedback on the programs, and then I got involved heavily. And then we had the 12-week program come out, which is now like Surf Smart, the intermediates program. So we labeled them just like, this is the beginner program, this is the intermediate program. I guess the mindset behind that, again, it's all Clay's coaching, but this idea kind of came from Jeremy and I were talking, and I was like, I feel we need a structured like approach to the training that people can kind of just check in and check out, and that people need like a pathway of like, where do I go? And I'm like, we kind of just need to do like a 12-week program of like, you can get all the training of these 8 programs, and we're going to layer them in the right order and give you the right process, and we're going to add on top of them and give you all new training. And that's where that kind of came from, and that's been like the biggest program. It's the number 1 program we recommend for pretty much anyone coming in. Like most people are intermediate, and we're like, start there, because that will then introduce you to everything, and then from there you can branch out on what you want to work on. And then Ant brought out his Mind Surfer program, which is a visualization program, which I have no insight on that because that was done with the guys. And then I was talking to the guys, and I was just saying, look, we've got Clay, Master Shaper, done it for 20 odd years. Like, we need to get a board design course out that's just going to help people, educate them to, like, if they want to buy a board or ride the right board, because a lot of people are riding the wrong boards, or they have no idea what they're talking about. So that came about, and it was just kind of, I wasn't really hands-on. I just threw the idea out there, and then the boys, Clay, Nico, and Ant, just went off and did it, and I think they've done a pretty good job. And that was then kind of started this year. I was like, well, there's a lot of people who were saying the 12-week program, the intermediate training program, was too advanced for them. And I was like, okay, well, we need to like invest time into a beginner course. And we're like, well, you know, a lot of that initial beginner stuff comes from just not knowing, and there's a lot less, and a beginner can progress to a lower intermediate a lot quicker than a lower intermediate to a high intermediate. So we came up with that training program, basically giving them everything from etiquette, you know, paddling, positioning, how to catch a wave. So basically they can just catch waves, stand up, right along the face, and enjoy it, and get to that point where they want to start learning. And then so Jeremy and Clay had originally done, the first thing they'd ever done together was this booklet, which is now the OMBE Method ebook that's been out for a while. It's completely free. I was looking at that and looking at a couple other things, and I was like, look, I think we kind of need to really focus on Clay's coaching and just like explaining it to people and like what it is, which is what you now know as the OMBE method. So when I was in Oz, I spoke to the guys, and this is one of the programs I had a lot to do with, in that I sat with Clay for pretty much every video, the whole structure, worked through it with the team. So the OMBE method was really like, we need to tell the story of how to actually improve your training, what you're going to go through, how your surfing is going to feel, what you want to understand and know, and a lot of these things that, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, that surfers feel understood. That like, hey, this is what I am going through. This is maybe why things suck sometimes, maybe why I'm running hot. And I think it's one of the best programs we've done, just because it feels like people can go out and teach you how to do a bottom turn, but no one's explaining the process, the learning experience that you're going to go through, and to wrap it in a way that makes sense. Because to use, I guess, something that we all use at work in OMBE is that surfing doesn't make sense to surfers, in that the explanation makes no sense if you've never felt a good bottom turn before. If you're just like, oh, like go and do a deep bottom turn, like what does that actually mean? And a lot of people are like, I don't know how to do a deep bottom turn. Do I just push harder? And I'm like, well, no, to be honest, you could just change where you're looking, and you'll go more vertical, and you'll hold the turn longer. And that's an easier way of explaining it than saying do a deep bottom turn. And then most recently, which is where the number of programs has blown out, is, again, this was something that I've heavily involved in at the beginning. I've now now that I'm back in England, the guys just kind of run with it. But we've now got these monthly challenges, which I guess what our goal with that is that we want to have one training program for every maneuver. So if someone wants to work on the bottom turn, the cutback, the floater, just surfing backhand, whatever it is, we wanted just a dedicated program on that. And it was quick, it gave you all the training you needed, but we also, through the journey that we've gone through, having this, giant community, a lot of feedback from surfers, seeing how people use the program, talking to people like yourself and hearing everyone's, like, when you told me your story of your friends, like understanding what works for people and what connects them, we needed to like break down the training in a whole new system than what we were doing before, which is where it came from. Like when I said what I wish I knew when I was younger, this is kind of what's heavily led to the development of the programs, is that we need to explain to someone why, like what is the thing that you're trying to do and how does it work? Because if you don't know how to physically do a cutback, how are you going to try and do it? It just doesn't really make sense. You can't really figure it out unless you just fumble your way through it. And then the second step was like, okay, well, everything's about OMBE, which is ocean, mind, body, equipment. And a lot of people didn't know that there's an order to that. So like we need to break down, if you're just doing a cutback, like it starts with paying attention to the ocean first. Like where are you doing the cutback? Like where is your mind at? Are you tense? Are you stressed? Do you know how to do the movement? And then if you look at your body, is your body like doing the movement properly? Are you stressed? Are you tense? Are you locking up? Is your body closing up? What's going on with your body? And then the final thing, the last thing we change is like, how's your board? Like, is your equipment suited to do a cutback? Are you on a giant foamy, or are you on a longboard, or are you on a board that's giving you too much response? Do you need to be on something a little bit easier so that you can feel it? And we're like, okay, so we need to break these things down and really explain it so people can get it a little bit deeper. And then it was all about skill acquisition, which was like, do your land-based training, do your water-based training. And that's kind of what we did before on all of our training programs. And I kind of felt that wasn't enough, in that most people, like, if we're trying to change something in someone's surfing, the thing holding them back is either they don't know what the feeling is or they're afraid. So it was like, everything in surfing is about feeling. So we need to tell them how to find the feeling. So if we use that, like how to fix your bottom turn, which is really just about changing where you look, and then we need to describe the feeling, which is like, you're going to feel this sudden acceleration and you're going to have this holy shit moment. What was that? And for someone to get better, I was like, we have to include that, because if they don't know what they're looking for, we kind of have to give them a goalpost of like, you need to run till you get to this point, till you feel something like this. And it may be explained differently to you. Everyone has a different explanation of what they feel, but I was like, you're going to want to feel something like this. And then the final thing is, again, using the same example and exactly what you went through, is like, how do we turn the fear into fun? And just that, if this is something you've struggled with, if you can't get over the hump, we need to give you tips on how you can change that. And then that's kind of what's formed the whole monthly challenges, which is like our catalog of maneuvers. And that's kind of the training programs, and kind of also the lifespan of them, how they've come to be. So now we're just kind of pumping out one new training program every month and breaking down the drills from beginner to intermediate to advanced, so people can just check in and be like, cool, I'm at this level, I can do this already, I can just start along this pathway and go from there, which has been really well received. A lot of people have been like, I'm so glad you've just given training for everything, so that if I want to be advanced, I can just go straight to my section. You've given me all the tools I need, which is, yeah, it's been amazing.
I think from the training programs that are out there, what makes it quite unique, again, not blowing smoke up your ass or anything like that, but like you're saying, you've broken everything down into the segments, into like bite-sized learning, basically, that everyone can understand and relate to. And that, I think, sometimes, if you go back to the old days where you had the DVDs or the VHSs, where you saw these pros and you had a little bit of an arrow going up saying he's coming up here and doing this and then coming back. But like you're saying there, you're not really explaining that he's rotating his hips, he's compressing his legs, he's here. And when he comes back round, you know, the whole OMBE concept and everything that is within the content has made it really user friendly, I think, and I think that's what I've got a question here. I was going to ask you is,
Okay.
well, you've already answered it basically. You know, what makes what makes it, you know, more unique than other training programs out there? But like I said, you've already answered it because it's answering the questions that people want to know instead of just saying, you know, how do I get more vertical? You do a deeper bottom turn and make your board face there. You've kind of broken it down to say this is what needs to happen. And I think again, it's something that's been crying out for years and years and years, and without having access and paying hundreds of pounds to a pro to try and get you somewhere in a couple of sessions, which is never going to happen. You've got something that people can keep and they can work on themselves, which is, you know, which is pretty cool, really.
Yeah, I think to expand on that, it's also just tough love, which I feel is kind of needed in surfing, in that it is really difficult. It is one of the most difficult sports. Like, I've got a variety of interests and things that I like doing, and I'm very much a self-learner. Surfing is the hardest sport, skill, activity I can think of that I've done in my entire life. And like, to learn that, just not having the repeatability, the same conditions over and over and over. Yeah, it's a difficult sport, and having tough love, just like you have to do it this way. Like, it is what it is. Just accept it, drop the ego, get in. I think clay is a massive part of what makes it different, in that first person to really explain it in such an easy way, and to simplify it, to drop the ego and just be like, this is the root problem. Because like, as you said, a lot of people want to fix the symptoms. Like, I want to surf faster and I want to do this, but they don't want to surf in the pocket. They still want to surf out in the safety. And it's like, okay, well, you need to confront your mental fears that you have around whatever it is. And I feel, a lot of people just kind of tell you to do things without telling you how to actually do it or how to overcome your fears, which is a big, big difference.
On another note, sport, are you going to watch the WSL finals?
Oh,
Well, you're not really into that.
I used to be massively. And then I think, this is my personal opinion, but the over Americanization of it, and I guess their push for mainstream, which is what they should have done. The business is starting to become profitable. It's going to give them more opportunities, yada, yada, yada. I feel really disengaged with it, in the sense that there's no personalities anymore. I kind of get really annoyed when I hear every like post-heat interview is just like, oh yeah, everyone's my best friend and I just take it one heat at a time and I just want to surf good. I'm like, can someone just like want to rip someone's head off and like want to like, yeah, I'm so stoked I beat him, like piss him off or piss her off and blah blah blah. I'm like, give us something, give us some kind of emotion. It's become very robotic.
I generally don't, you know, listen to the commentary. I turn it off. I mean, I used to love listening to the Bart
Yeah.
Lynch.
Yeah.
He was amazing because, you know, he actually sort of like subliminally used to put those little things into there as well.
Yeah.
You know, what he's saying about, you know, dissing other opponents and stuff like that, you know, a little bit of banter. But, you know, when he went, I kind of just put it on mute. I love it. I really do. I love watching it. It annoys me the amount of ads, like watching YouTube. You know, you stick something on and I'm watching like the UFC or something like that, and then, you know, Bet365 comes on every 2 minutes, and I'm like, if I wanted to gamble, I'd go and get the app and I'd gamble.
Yeah.
But I don't want to watch that shit. But I love watching it, and
Get ad blocker.
Unfortunately, when it's actually in the programming, you can't just ad block the program, though, can you?
Yeah, but you can do that to the WSL. I feel a bit bad doing it sometimes, but it's also then super awkward because they just have a stay tuned and there's like a zoomed out footage of people on the beach, and I'm like, okay, this is really not much better than the ads.
Yeah, well, if you watch the YouTube replay afterwards, I just fast forward it into the heats that I want to watch, or you know.
Yeah, Um,
But I really enjoy watching it. I enjoy watching it for what it is, and I'm kind of like it's just an elongated rugby game now.
yeah, I haven't enjoyed it as much. The last like memorable, like I used to watch every contest as much as I could. I remember being awake at random hours of the night in Oz to watch certain events. But a lot of them, yeah, just felt really stale, or they end up in really crappy conditions. I saw a clip the other day of somewhere in America, and it was like not even knee high, and they were in a contest, and I was like, well, that is terrible. Like, admittedly, they're doing the right thing in like scaling down competitors to get them cheaper, running events and running people in shorter windows and having forecast windows longer. And yeah, I kind of wish they'd take a bit of the big wave approach, like when the swell's there, go there. But financially, that's just not applicable. But like the last really memorable contest was the Cape Fear one in like ooh, 2015, 2016. I don't know if you saw that one. It's the Red Bull Cape Fear one in
I did,
Sydney.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was watching that live coming home from uni, like all my housemates were sitting there just mental, and it was just average Joe surfers, and there's a couple pros in there, but it was yeah, like there hasn't been a big contest like that in a while that like you can't turn it off. Whereas I feel a lot of the WSL heats, I'm like, I'll see who's coming up, and like, I don't like their surfing, I don't like their surfing.
I didn't mind the Mexico event. I like that.
Mm,
Where is it? Surfing the point break there. I mean, granted, watching it's kind of like watching bells. Really, there's only so much you can do on a wave like that.
yeah.
That's not, that isn't repetitive.
Mm,
But okay, you could argue, watching the guy surfing like Chopu or somewhere like that, or Tiahopu, whatever they say on the
mm,
WSL, which is mental. Anyway, that's a different conversation. But watching those guys in there where they're just taking off and getting a barrel, but then
mm.
barrels are like if you understand the consequence of that, but then once you've watched 19 hours of it, it kind of
Yeah.
breaks you a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, I did watch the actual Padang Padang Cup. It came on while I was working, and I saw the last maybe 2 hours, which was really good because it's just like it's on when good surf's on, which I'm a big proponent of surf shitty waves, go surf different conditions to get better as a surfer. But when I want to watch pro surf, I'm like, man, can we just see them in really good waves, doing the best they can do? Yeah, I just kind of yeah, but I think it's the commentary. It's probably just become like a cricket thing now, where you should just turn it on, clean the house, do some chores, check in when you check in.
Exactly. Dude, let's finish on a little bit of a quick fire round.
Hmm. Go for it.
Okay, so the first question is if you had one fin setup, one surfboard fin setup for the rest of your life, would it be a single fin, twin fin, thruster, bonza, quad, 2+1, or finless?
I'd probably go thruster, even though I don't have many thrusters at the moment.
Tea or coffee?
Black coffee.
Favorite place to surf?
Oh, down where my extended family live, which is northern New South Wales, the mid-north coast. It's about 3 hours north of Sydney. Pre-COVID, it was amazing. Post-COVID, now, everything's happened in the world where everyone has moved out of every major city. But little local town, reef break, kind of like rock reef, not like a slabbing reef, just kind of more of a point. But I love going there, one, because it's tiny town, nature everywhere. I've grown up going down there my whole life. You paddle out and there's five guys out and they're like, it's crowded. For them, five guys, there's one suck rock. You can either jump off the rock to catch the wave, or you can sit next to it on a higher tide and paddle it. But the fact that you can paddle there, you go out and people are like, oh, hey man, haven't seen you in like a year. Like, what are you up to? You back seeing the family. I went back there middle of this year and it was like 20 people. It's kind of really still hasn't broken it for me, but I was just like, yeah, the magic's kind of lost. Like when it's this super core local group and everyone's accepting, and the idea of five people is crazy crowded.
Yeah, it goes back to the conversation at the start there, right?
Yeah.
The worst person to share a lineup with?
Oh, it's an old university friend. We would do. his name's Will. I won't give his last name. He probably won't know, but he's shocking. He wouldn't pay for petrol on a trip to the beach. Would fake pretending to be asleep so he didn't have to pay for petrol. And he would drop in on everyone and anyone and then laugh about it. And I just got to a point where I was like, man, if you're not even going to pay for petrol, like, I'm done. So, yeah, don't surf with him anymore.
I got a great story. One of my friends, Andy, who mentioned earlier, we went on a boat trip, and there was a lad similar. Obviously, didn't pay for petrol money because we're on a boat. But anyway, he used to drop in on everyone, and he sent this lad in. He goes, mate, get on the boat. Sent him in like a naughty schoolboy. It was funny as anything.
I will actually add something, which is no offense to him. My first surf with Ant from OMBE was just like, holy hell, what is going on? There's just so much talking and chatting and yelling and screaming, but like everything's super excitable. But I was just like we hadn't met each other face to face until I went to Australia because he came through friends with Clay. Yeah, that was like that first surf with him. I was just not prepared for it because how he appears on camera is how he is like all the time. He just has insane amounts of energy and doesn't slow down. It is mental. I don't understand where he gets it.
Just don't give him the blue Smarties. That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
The best person to share a lineup with?
My partner.
If you had one place to surf for the rest of your life, where would it be?
Oh, if I could get uncrowded point breaks, I would. But I would say, yeah, where my family live, where it is small. It's not the best wave ever, but the atmosphere makes up for it. And you got a beachy next to a reef point break, so it both kind of works.
All the OMBE content and your podcast, where can people find it and watch it?
YouTube, OMBE Surf. You'll find everything there. The website, ombe.co. The community app is community.ombe.co. So that houses basically kind of like a Facebook for OMBE. So I personally don't like social media. That is a great like outlet that I can just, that's kind of my social media that I can turn off all my notifications. When I open it, I can open it. I don't have to be bombarded. It's not an endless scroll. And then the podcast is In Depth, the Surfing Podcast, which you can find wherever you get podcasts from.
Brilliant. I'll stick all that stuff into the notes, mate.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Luke Hardacre, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast. It's been amazing talking to you, dude.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
And that's it. If you like the podcast, please like, share and subscribe on your podcast providers and leave a little bit of a message or a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening.